Good evening. Hello, hello, anybody? Not on yet. Are we there? Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our City Council meeting, a regular consolidated meeting. We're going to call it to order, and first we'll do a roll call by our City Clerk, Marcy Killian.
The record will reflect that all members are present.
Okay, we'd like to welcome Pastor George Hooper from the United Methodist Church of Vista, and he is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation. And if you remain standing after the Pledge of Allegiance for the invocation, please.
Let's stand. Let us pledge allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This is not a prayer, this is a reflection, so I invite you to be in an attitude of reflection. The month of November, with its falling leaves, temperatures, and drops of rain, affords us all an opportunity to gather in our resources, our friends, and our families, to reflect upon that for which we are thankful, and to seek that which we must have in order to survive the challenges which are here and which are yet to come. We are indeed a thankful people. We give thanks for home and community, and those whose wisdom and foresight have given us direction and forms of government which allow the voices of all people to be heard and addressed, which allow all persons the opportunity to better themselves and to provide for all their own daily needs. We give thanks for our nation and those whose courage and commitment have ensured justice and liberty, and who are even today working for security for this nation and the nations of the world. We give thanks for each other, understanding that it is only by the participation of each citizen, using the gifts with which each of us has been endowed, that we shall persevere through our present trials and move together into a future with hope. We are a seeking people. We seek vision and strength for those who lead the nations of this world, who lead this nation, state, and county, and in particular this night, for those who have answered the high calling to lead our blessed city of Vista. We seek an understanding of actions which will allow the members of this council and the people they represent to build community, to live with justice, and to have the structure and infrastructure which will allow each individual the opportunity to succeed in their endeavors and to thrive. We seek an openness to new ideas, to refreshed vigor, and to a celebration of the many varied gifts and ways in which each person has been created and called to be, that we may be true to our varied and common traditions, that we may live with equity and peace, and that we may always speak the truth in love. May our words of thanksgiving be heard, and may we receive that which we seek. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Hooper. The next thing is the approval of the agenda by our City Manager, Rita Geldert. You on?
Thank you, Mayor. No additions or deletions to the agenda.
We didn't have a closed session today, so there will be no report by our City Attorney, Daryl Piper. And we actually have no presentations tonight, so we will go. The next thing is our consent calendar, and the recommendations on the following consent calendar will be enacted in one motion unless an item is removed from the calendar by a member of the council or by a member of the public. Any member of the public can remove an item by submitting a request to speak on a card to the city clerk or secretary. Items removed from the consent calendar will be considered immediately following the adoption of the calendar. And our consent items are C1 through C16, and I have two pulled here of C12 and C14. Is that what this one too? Do I have any pulled that the council would like to pull? Councilmember Gronke?
C11, please.
So C11, okay. Okay, any other ones? Okay, so with that, I would entertain a motion for the balance of the consent calendar.
I move to approve the consent calendar. I'll make a second that.
Okay, please cast your votes. Okay, motion passes unanimously. So the next thing we will go to is item C11, which is the Regional Winter Shelter and Emergency Declaration. Councilmember Gronke, do you want to?
Would you like a
I don't need a
report?
staff report on this.
Okay.
I just would like to comment on it. When does it open now? Okay, sorry. It just seems to me that in these times when the economy's down and the discrepancy between the rich and the poor is even greater, I think we're going to see a lot of young families that need our services. So thank you so much for doing this for our city. Appreciate it. And thank all the churches, too, for all their participation. I'll go ahead and make a motion for this item.
Second.
Councilmember Lopez had something to say.
Thank you, Mayor. The winter shelter like that is used only for a few months out of the year. I think that we should look here in the coming years to start looking for maybe a permanent place for them, because the present place that they're in is not the best, and I think that we should get together and work on something or somehow to find a permanent place for them, because it comes every year, and the present building that they have now is used just for a few months, and it just stays idle the rest of the time. So let's start thinking about that. Thank you.
Did you want to second that motion?
Yes, second it.
Okay, City Manager Geldert? You want?
To mention, thank you, that the Operation Hope Board has met. They have a strategic plan that they're working on, and that they are working on a permanent facility, which needs to be independent of the city, but the Board of Directors is working on a permanent facility that where they won't be so limited year-round, and they could possibly look at other revenue-seeking, generating ideas during the year when they're not using it as a shelter. So it's an excellent approach that they're taking.
Councilmember Coles?
Yeah, one quick reminder, the Operation Hope is having an open house this Saturday evening. I believe it's from 4 to 6. So I hope we can all show up and say hi.
Support them. That's a good idea. Okay, with that, then I have a motion and a second. So please cast your votes. Councilmember Lopez, push your button again. Okay, there it goes. Okay, motion passes unanimously. The next item is pulled is the Street Tree Maintenance Services Agreement. So I would like just maybe a short report, and then we have one speaker that pulled it. You want to give us a short report?
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. I'm Jim Howell, Director of Public Works, and this is Chuck Chris, our operations manager that oversees the street tree operation. And also in the audience tonight is Mike Pallett, back here in the blue shirt. He's the San Diego Regional Coordinator for West Coast Arborists, and we're here to answer any questions that you may have on the contract.
Okay, do you want to hear the speakers and then comments? Councilmember Lopez, do you want to hear the speaker first? Okay, we have one speaker, Chuck Rabel.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Chuck Rabel, Vista citizen, and retired from the productive sector. On this particular item, you got to renew a contract. And if you get down to page 7 of the staff report, you'll find out that it's West Coast Arborist, and they're out of Anaheim. These are tough times, folks. We've got people in the area, in the town, that could be doing this work, but they're not given a chance because this is an extension. And I know it's easier on staff to make these extensions, but we need to help our local folks. The same applies to C7, which, if you get to the staff report, it says you have to come to the city clerk to find out where that organization is from. Like I said, it's tough. Times are tough. If you go to C7, statewide stripes are going to are extending our agreement with them to mark the streets. I don't know where they're from, but if possible, please, let's keep work local. Thank you much.
Okay, Councilmember Lopez.
Thank you, Mayor. Oh, there you go. I understand what you're saying, Mr. Rabel, but I believe this company did come down in price this year quite a bit, like, what, $30,000 or something like that?
Net 24% less than the past contract.
Well, we appreciate that to the company, but you also have on that, you have a 24 month, which is 2-year period, correct?
That's correct.
And then you have an additional 2 years on top of that, correct?
Yes, if council approves another
Yes.
amendment on it.
Well, I mean, the company that you had has done a great job for us, but there's also 2 more years, and then 2 years after that. Don't you think that we should actually think about going out for bid after the 2 years instead of continuing more years down the road without really knowing what, these are tough times. So, but I mean, I voted for it to go forward, but we also have an earlier one that we voted on here with the Vista Printing and MG company from out of town, from Irvine or Orange County, somewhere up there. There was a difference in price, which I can't argue with staff, but I hope that we're looking at, when we look at these bids, apples with apples, and not go so long on these contracts, because by next year, things could be different in the city and in the country, and maybe we could do a lot better. So to have them that long, we're not going to see this for 4 more years. 4 more years before we even see this. So, I just don't see us going like this, but I did vote for it because he did come down on price, the company did, and appreciate that. But I hope it's apples with apples, because that's how we save money, this city. Thank you.
Well, if I could respond to that, we will be coming back to council if we choose to pursue further extensions of this agreement. Before the meeting, I talked to Mr. Pallett, again, that's with West Coast Arborist. Their home office is in Orange County. However, they have a San Diego office. They have a San Marcos office. All of their employees that work here in the city live in the region, and he has several employees that live within the city of Vista.
Well, that's what's important, is that they use, when you have a local company and the owners of the company live in this community and have homes in this community, buy gas in this community, buy food in this community, those are the things that I've always talked about here on this dais, is that we need to continue to really look at this, because when you look at $1 million here and $1 million there, it's out of this town. We need to keep that $2 or $3 million in here instead of it going out of town, because I'm pretty sure the company from Riverside that you're paying $1 million something to do your trees, or in the past, I'm pretty sure that company is not going to come to Vista and spend that $1 million here. We've lost that $1 million. So we really need to, even the council really needs to look at this. Mr. Aguilera, a couple of weeks ago, talked about a company that does designing. Those people live in Vista. Maybe their company's right out of town, but the majority of the people live in Vista. So that means that company maybe should have been in our list, and that company then would spend that money here. So enough of me, so let's look at this a little differently next time and make sure it's apples with apples. Thank you, Ms. Ritter.
Mayor Pro Tem Aguilera.
Yeah, Mr. Howell, I have a question on the original contract for the 130. When was that? Was that ending now, or are we kind of reworking the contract and extending it further? And if we are, how long is the new extension for? How long are we locked into?
Well, to answer the first part of the question, the current agreement ends tomorrow, the fourth year of the current agreement. There was one additional year that we could have extended with those prices. Pardon me. What we're bringing you here tonight is a different piggyback opportunity, a cooperative purchase over a competitive bid process that occurred just in July, I believe it was, in the city of Poway, that did have apples and apples. So the code allows us to adopt the city of Poway's competitive process here tonight. So what we're recommending is that we enter into a one-year agreement with West Coast Arborists with that price scale that's 24% less than we've been paying. It's frankly a great price, a great opportunity.
Great, yeah. Okay, so one more year?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think that's all I have on that. And for Mr. Rabels, to answer his question, that company is based out of San Diego, statewide.
That's it. No other comments? And I have a question. This is like kind of not related to theirs, but because I just had somebody mention this to me, and you already know about this, is the way they trim the trees, and I know maybe it's the kind of trees or something, but we've been trimming the trees so they go straight up rather than make it a canopy, which in some cities, you can walk underneath the trees and there's a canopy and it's shady, and so I just wonder, is it our policy to trim them straight up, or is it the kind of tree, and is there a way of changing that? So like in the downtown area, maybe we could have, so they make a canopy and you can have nice shade trees. I don't know that. You probably know, Mr. Chris, you probably dealt with that.
Yeah, the trees we're talking about are liquid ambers, and it really is indicative of the shape of the canopy, the way they grow. And those trees growing in that dense urban environment, really what we're doing is we're not exceeding a 20 to 25% reduction in the way of a crown. And the shape of those trees is really more so dictated by that particular genus.
By the kind of tree? Well, and I saw some others being over by Rancho Buena Vista High School, and they were trimming them, and they were the same thing. They were like very tall, and they took off all the side branches and made them, and I just thought they don't look doesn't look like a very inviting environment when they have them trimmed like that, it's so much nicer when you see the trees like on our back windows back there.
Sure. Well, we definitely go into looking at the tree and reducing some of the undesirable growth, but it's not our intent to shape it or lollipop it. One of the approaches that we implement in the way of tree trimming is also to control reactionary growth. And so the approach is recognized as called the ANSI 300 pruning, and all the tree trimming staff are certified. And occasionally you'll see that, but for the most part, we try to leave the trees looking so that they're somewhat in a natural kind of a state. But different trees grow with different shapes.
Yeah, and I know they do. I just was trying to think if it was a policy that we had the way we trimmed them, or if that could be changed, or if it was just the way the trees. Because I'm not an arborist, so I don't know that. And I would say that too when they're looking at there are different companies here in Vista. I don't know how many arborists there are. This isn't just landscapers that do the tree maintenance. They're actually an arborist company that does that. So. Okay, so we have more speakers now. Okay, Councilmember Coles.
Yeah, I was pleased to hear that that the people that work on our projects are local, or at least in the area. So even though the headquarters may be elsewhere, we have many companies headquartered elsewhere that do work here and live here and shop here. So I was pleased to hear that feedback. And with that, I'd like to make a motion to approve item C12.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Councilmember Lopez, do you have something else you want to say? Did you forget?
Senior moment. It was about the arborists. Most companies here in town that are certified companies do have arborists already on board. So that's a plus for companies.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so please vote. Motion passes with one nay, which would be Councilmember Lopez. Okay, so the next item will be item that was pulled, item 14, C14, which is our aerial fire truck purchase.
Would council like a report? That was pulled by a community member, so would you like a report prior to the speaker?
Would you want
A report from the chief?
a report before we have a speaker, or?
Well, they look prepared. I think we ought to let them give
Okay.
us their...
Yeah.
Chief,
As long
Chief
as they're-
Fisher?
As long as they're all prepared, we'll let them give us a report.
Okay. Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. Gary Fisher, Fire Chief. With me, I have Battalion Chief Jeff Hahn. Chief Hahn really put this project together, but I'll give you a quick overview. Okay, so tonight the fire department is proposing to purchase one aerial truck, or a ladder, which was approved as part of the fiscal year 11-12 operating budget. This truck was originally scheduled to be purchased in 2010, but we've delayed it for 2 years as a cost-saving measure. Non-scheduled maintenance on the truck and repair costs over the last 2 years have increased, and they continue to increase, and it's becoming a real issue with us, where the truck is out of service almost as much as it is in service, so it's an issue. The fire department has only one aerial truck. It's 13 years old. It's the oldest vehicle that we have in the fleet in frontline service. And it has almost 100,000 miles on it, which is a lot of miles for a vehicle like that. That vehicle is very heavy, and it has a lot of wear and tear. It runs as an all-risk vehicle, so it runs EMS calls, it runs traffic accidents, it runs fires. It's in and out of the station a lot, and there's been a lot of wear and tear on that vehicle.
Sorry to interrupt, but what's the typical length of trip?
Your typical response is going to be 2 miles to 4 miles.
That's a lot of trips.
That's a lot of trips. And I would just also note that ISO, Insurance Services Offices, mandates us to have one aerial. They recommend 2, but we get X number of points with 1. And so it's not something that we can do without, especially given the high rise that we have, 4- and 5-story buildings around the city and the courthouse. Our current aerial will not reach the backside of the courthouse because of the setbacks. This new aerial would be able to do that. And that concludes my report, and we'll try to answer any questions that you all might have.
Do you want to hear a speaker first? Okay, Cliff Kaiser.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I have a couple questions about this proposal, and it's kind of in line with some concerns I had about previous proposals. We're about ready to spend over $1 million on a new fire truck. Last month, we spent almost $200,000 on an ambulance, and the month before that, we spent $100,000 on a bunch of computer equipment. And I believe the month before that, there was even a large sum invested in a public works truck. And my concern is that when I read the agenda items and the supporting documents that go with that, it's all kind of, in my mind, kind of fluffy as to why it's required. There's no real justification, you know, and what the chief just said, forgive me, chief, is it's old and it's breaking and it's time to fix. Well, how much is it costing us to fix it? How much is it down? How many times was it actually required to be on site? How many times did we need an aerial truck on site at the courthouse or any of the other buildings within the city of Vista, or any call in the ISO? How many times do we need these vehicles that we need to spend this much money in today's economy right now? Now, I understand it was budgeted, and that's important that we do budget it, and I'm glad that the council and the city has saved money in order to buy this purchase. But there's a lot of purchases that we have delayed and continue to delay, and there's a lot of cuts that we've made, even though we have reserves set aside for a rainy day. So the fact that we've budgeted this and saved for this doesn't mean that now's the time that we need to buy that. You know, I have a car that's 11 years old, and I analyze frequently at least every 6 months or a year, is it time to buy a new car? How much is it going to cost me to buy a new car? Well, I'm going to have to pay the car payment. I'm going to have to pay increased insurance costs. I'm going to pay reduced maintenance costs. But when I figure that all out together, I say, well, is now the time? And right now, it's not the right time. Today is not the economy to be taking rainy day funds or reserve funds or even funds that have been set aside and saying to buy this kind of huge purchase. So the overall thing is, in these last few large item purchases, it's just not clear that we've really dug down in terms of the return on investment. I'm going to buy this stuff now, and this is the reason, because it's going to save me this amount of money over this amount of time, or it's going to save this many lives, or it's going to save this amount of time, or whatever. The other item, of course, which I already alluded to, is now the right time. In today's economic climate, do we need to spend that money right now? Do we need a new ambulance? Do we need a new fire truck? Do we need 12 new servers right now this year when we have all the other budget cuts in place?
I need you to wrap up. Your yellow light's on, so now it just turned red.
Where is the lights?
It's right in front of you. There. No. Right, on your right hand.
Oh, this thing.
Yeah.
Sorry. All right. I apologize. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Councilmember Lopez. Oh, do I have another speaker? Oh, yeah, do you want to answer those?
Sure, I'd be happy to respond to
More
that.
questions.
There, Mr. Heiser makes some good points. The issue really becomes one of reliability for us. You have a 13-year-old vehicle that the public comes to expect a certain level of reliability, and because of the nature and the age of the vehicle, we're getting to the point where we can't guarantee that. Recently we had major repairs on the truck on the ladder section where the ladder is cracking. The truck is just at the end of its service life, and I think that the liability on the city for not providing a reliable piece of equipment is going to be much greater than the cost of the piece of equipment in the long run. And when you consider the cost of the operating the department, the cost of an ambulance, the cost of an engine or ladder is really, in comparison, not that big of a cost. We will be buying another one of these in another 10 to 15 years. So you amortize that over 10 or 15 years. The cost is not as extreme as it seems when you're purchasing. But it's really important that we keep reliable apparatus on the road, and that when we get to the scene of an emergency, it's going to work, and it's going to work as it's designed.
Oops.
Excuse me, I would like to add is that we do have the schedule and the maintenance. We have all the records, and we did supply that for the ambulance in that report, and it's a good question. We have all of that data, and we can provide that to you. Also, Chief Hahn can get that, because that is a schedule that we review, and that's why it was extended out a couple of years. We don't go into these purchases lightly, and it's not just because it's budgeted. It's been budgeted for the last 3 years, and we keep pushing it out because we want to extend the life out of it. Well, this year we've extended it a little bit too far because it's out of service more than it's in. So we have those records and the maintenance, and that's reviewed. Then the cost, when the cost to maintain it exceeds the cost of the purchase and purchase price we put aside each year, that's when the vehicle gets replaced. And so Chief Hahn will be happy to supply those to you, those records to you.
Now, Councilmember Lopez, followed by Councilmember Grunke.
Thank you, Mayor. Normally we get an average is our city manager. Usually it's about 10 years is what we get out of a truck?
Out of a ladder truck, yes.
Okay, and we got how many this time?
12 plus 12, a little over 12.
A little over 12, so we're a little ahead. I want to thank you for planting this seed years ago on saving that money to eventually have the money to purchase it. A question for you is that when this new ladder truck that we purchase, Santa Fe corridor is going to be having four-story buildings or maybe little taller buildings there in the near future. Will this ladder truck be sufficient for all that?
Yes, this ladder truck will be 100 feet long. I should say the ladder's 100 feet long. The truck's not quite that long. And it will typically reach 8 to 10 stories, depending on the setback that we encounter around the building. And a lot of buildings have some fairly significant setbacks, like the courthouse. The courthouse is back quite a ways. That's why we can't reach the courthouse with our current unit.
So if you're on a run, there's a pretty good-sized building on fire, and sometimes you're in a hurry, and you're shifting gears, and an axle breaks, what happens?
We typically would pull off to the side because we're all done.
So do we have another truck to take its place?
We do not have another aerial truck.
Okay. Now, we're going to purchase this new one. Difficult times. Were you able to get the best price here with, I believe, did you go with someone else to get a better price?
We
as
did.
far as
We piggybacked, and I would turn that over to Chief Hahn to talk about that, if you'd like to hear about that for a second.
Okay.
What we did is we looked at 10 different manufacturers, looked pretty much all over the market, and then started looking for pricing that we could get, and we ended up getting the best deal by piggybacking off of Orange County. Off an Orange County specification in 2009, they bought 2 of those aerial apparatus. And actually, we took that piggyback spec. We're paying under what Orange County paid in 2009. Because it's, because of the economy, I think it's, a lot of ways a better time to buy some stuff because the manufacturers are pretty hungry to be able to produce product. So you got a very good price.
Thank you. If we said, okay, we're going to spend $1 million today just out of our general fund, I would say no, because it's just the wrong time. But we have been planning for this for a while. That is good planning for the future. Now, once we get the second one, are we going to retire that one completely, or we're going to keep it?
We have plans to keep it as a reserve so that when this one goes in for scheduled maintenance, hopefully not breakdowns, we'll have one to use in service, so we won't be without one. Like, for instance, today we're without one.
Okay, so then we will keep it for how long?
Yes, sir. It'll be scheduled out to 20 years if we can make it last that long.
At 20 years?
And then at 20 years, we'll retire it at a reserve fleet.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Gronke?
I've heard us talk about pricing and reserves and liability, but I didn't hear anybody saying about public safety, and I think that's what this is all about. Obviously, you made a good decision to maintain that truck over its lifetime, and now it's time to move on and get a good one so we have a safe unit that we can rely on. So I will definitely be approving this measure. Going back to that older truck that you're going to have in reserve, is there an opportunity to have that inside, or is that a necessity for the longevity of the truck? If you're going to hold it, can you possibly put it inside like you can some of your other units?
You mean when you say put it aside?
He means housing
your older
inside.
unit that you're holding in reserve.
Yeah, we would keep that in reserve. Is that what you're saying?
Would it be held within a station, or would it be outside?
Yes. No, it would be inside the station.
Okay, fantastic. Unless there's someone else, I'll go ahead and make a measure to approve this.
I'll second.
Can I get a motion and a second? Please cast your votes. That motion passes unanimously. Next item we're going into our discussion items, and the first discussion item will be on the Central Vista Business Improvement District. They call it the CVBID, or CV bid.
It's a pretty good warranty, though, for a vehicle. Was that right?
I'm thinking we would like a short report.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the Council. I'm Kevin Ham, Director of Economic Development, and with me is Rachel Beld, our Economic Development Specialist, and she'll be giving the presentation this evening.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. On September 27, 2011, the City Council adopted Ordinance Number 2011-7 relating to the Central Vista Business Improvement District, CVBID Advisory Board. In accordance with the ordinance, the item before you tonight will confirm the appointment of the Advisory Board members, set their duties, and approve an agreement for management of the CVBID with the Vista Village Business Association, the VBBA. As dictated by the Municipal Code, the Vista Village Business Association has recommended 3 members of their Board of Directors for inclusion on the Advisory Board. They are Kent Schuman, John Alisi, and Diane Oakes. The City received application for the Council-selected seats, and interviews were held with 10 applicants. The Mayor is recommending the following Advisory Board appointments: Dee Dee Timmons, Kim Olinger, Brad Peterson, and Maureen Barrick. All 7 individuals are business owners within the CVBID, subject to the assessment fee. The Advisory Board will be assigned new responsibilities memorialized by the attached resolution. The duties include preparing an annual report for the City Council with input from the VBBA, reviewing annual and quarterly reports related to CVBID activities and expenditures, and as appropriate, making recommendations on policies, municipal code changes relating to the CVBID area, fees, programs, and boundaries. A comprehensive list of duties is presented in Exhibit 2. In order to execute the CVBID work plan presented to Council in March, an agreement with the VBBA to administer the CVBID must be executed. The agreement will allocate the CVBID assessment revenues and a grant of $40,000 to the VBBA. The agreement recognizes a $10,000 advance payment that was provided to the VBBA for operations and reduces the $40,000 CVBID payment to $30,000 so as to repay this advance. Staff recommends confirmation of the CVBID Advisory Board appointments, their duties, and approval of the agreement with the VBBA. This concludes my report. Kevin Ham, VBBA representatives, and I are available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Do I have any questions, or do you want to hear speakers? I have 2 speakers. Can I take us first? Okay, first is Cliff Kaiser.
Mayor, Council. I am very much applaud you in recognizing the need for change down in the downtown area. And I believe that the direction that you're moving, as indicated by this agenda item, is in a direction that is very positive. As you already know, some of the success of Vista in the future is based on a vibrant downtown area, and there are movements afoot to make that happen, and this is a good movement as well. But there are 2 other things that are very important. I know you're working on some of those, and the last one maybe needs a little bit more work, and that is that redevelopment has to happen. Okay, we can't have a vibrant downtown community, even if we have a great downtown district and management there, if there's nothing to come down there and see. Okay, the village is one spot, but the rest of it needs work. Okay, we got to get the demonstration block done. We got to get South Paseo Santa Fe done. We've got to get improvements in the downtown area itself, the historic village. And the other one is, and this is something that maybe doesn't get as much attention, is those areas in the downtown area that are city-owned or perhaps even commercially owned that don't get the regular maintenance that they need. When people come to downtown and they see weeds and they see trash, particularly on the demonstration blocks and the 2 dirt lots just across the street from Vista Village, and other areas along Paseo Santa Fe, it just doesn't set a good impression. The city and the staff went through great efforts to make the downtown look a lot better for the Strawberry Festival. I applaud those efforts. We've got the Chambers got the parade coming up here in less than a month away, so it'd be another time to take a look down there to make sure that the city downtown area is in a condition that's presentable. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Councilmember Lopez. Well, although how do I say that? He's not on the dais today, but and during this item because there's a conflict of interest, but he's going to be our speaker and speak as his own person. Where is he? There he is. He's coming, okay.
Good evening, Council. My name is Frank Lopez. I'm property owner on South Santa Fe. What I'd like to speak about tonight is the folks that you picked for the VVBA. I think you did a good job, but you failed on one little thing, was that there are 3 districts there, and the people that you picked for the VVBA as their advisory was all from Main Street. So you need to look at it maybe in the future that you look at, there's also the C area, which has nobody that represents, there's no representation from that area as an advisor person. So let's look at that next time. I think you did a good job on who you picked, but that is a problem there. Looking at the downtown vista, whether it's the VVA or the Chamber, they all have their eyes open on different little problems that we have downtown. And I think that the city has done a great job as far as working on the graffiti. There's times when there's a lot of graffiti and they jump right on it. But if there is graffiti, please call the city. I'm talking about the public, because they will come out and take care of that. And but I'm also thankful and thank the council that you continued with the VVBA, because it is an important organization in our community. They have people on that organization who do not get paid, who volunteer all their time to do what's right for their community. And the people who are on that board right now love their community. And so they're there because they're interested in their community, and they believe in it. So thank you for what you've done with the VBA. Thank you very much.
The reason that we picked, I think the people we didn't have very many members. I don't know if we had anybody from...
yes, you did have somebody from the South Vista. You had Mr. Tapia.
But the problem was that if someone brought it to my attention, or our attention, that he's a member of your family, and you also have your wife and your son-in-law on the board.
Well, I don't live with him, so I don't, it's not like...
Well, I know, but it's be 3 members of your family, so...
Well, maybe next time you'll pick somebody...
That was the only person from that area that applied.
But if you could pick somebody from that area, try and make another effort to see if somebody else will apply from that area.
That would be great.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I have speakers. I have Councilmember Gronke, followed by Councilmember Coles.
Well, first I want to thank Mayor Ritter and Councilmember Coles for taking the time to interview these individuals, and I want to congratulate you on your choices. I think they're good choices. I also want to say I agree with Mr. Kaiser that we do need to clean up the downtown, and particularly when there's events. So I would hope that before the Chamber Christmas parade that we'd clean up those weeds and so forth. That will happen. I also agree with them that redevelopment needs to happen, but we're waiting until January to find out what the state will come down and tell us whether that's going to happen or not. So we're keeping our fingers crossed. About the BBBA, I think we've done a good thing for them to assist them. I'm a little unclear on the process of the distribution of money. So the organization that we're putting together will have authority over that money and distribution. Is that money distributed as the plan comes through and we request that particular portion of the $40,000 we have available?
So 10 days from this evening, the VVBA will give us a detailed annual plan, which essentially is their plan going forward, how the monies will be spent. The advisory board that will look at that, confirm that, and then forward it to the city. That will be the document that we'll use to track their progress with regard to their work activities and also fund their activities. In addition, we have a reimbursable process, so that comes directly to the city, so we check each of those items against that annual work plan. And the advisory board will also review the quarterly updates that they submit to the city to make sure they're on track.
So the quarterly updates are going to come to the city, or they're going to come to the advisory board and then pass through into your office?
They come first to the advisory board.
Okay.
So the advisory board can look at them, and then they come to the city.
No, I'm unclear on the VBBA's responsibility on those quarterly reports. We'll see them as a council when you present them to us, or will the VVBA present them to us directly?
We don't typically present those to the council. We have them available if you'd like to review them.
Okay.
The VVBA is the contractor in this instance. Will produce them, submit them to the advisory board. If the advisory board sees some errors, they'll make changes, give them back to the VVBA, give them to the advisory board, and then they come to us as staff.
Sounds like it's a pretty solid accounting process then. Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Coles.
Yes, and first of all, I'd like to thank you, Mayor, for allowing me to serve on the selection committee. It was an educational process for me. It gave me an opportunity to get feedback from some of the downtown personalities that are interested in making us a vibrant city and an attractive retail destination. It was a tough selection. We had, I think, 9 or 10 candidates we interviewed. I could have picked any or all of them, and we ended up picking people that I felt would blend best with the VVBA and their goals and objectives and provide us with the feedback. I appreciate the fact that staff is going to be able to handle this internally, and we won't have to bring this up every quarter for a council review, because I think we've set them in a good direction, and a year from now then we'll get some feedback as to how we accomplish this. So I'd like to move to adopt the City Resolution 2011.
I'll second it.
Okay, that's all three recommendations, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Please cast your votes. Okay, that motion passes unanimously, with Councilmember Lopez excused. The next item will be the fiscal year 2010-11 fourth quarter financial report. And our finance manager, treasurer, Dale Nielsen, will give us a report on that. No? Is lights on?
Is it? Oh, there we go. Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Dale Nielsen. I'm the Finance Manager and City Treasurer for the City of Vista. Tonight, before you, I'm presenting the fourth quarter financial report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2011. You may recall that 2 weeks ago I was before you presenting the first quarter report for the current fiscal year. There's quite a bit more work involved in the final quarterly report for any given fiscal year, closing the books, doing all the accounting entries to get everything into the way it needs to be for financial reporting purposes. So that's why things seem to be out of order here a little bit. For the 2010-11 fiscal year, general fund revenues from outside sources totaled about $56.6 million. After accounting for revenues from other funds and uses of reserves, total general fund resources for the year were about $71.5 million. Exhibit 2 on page 9 of the staff report provides budgetary and actual revenue information for the general fund for the fiscal year. Part of the year-end closing process involves taking those revenues that the city received in July and even into August that we were entitled to or earned as of June 30th and bringing them back into the fiscal year ended June 30th. Those are the accruals that we need to do, and that's one of the reasons why the fourth quarter report takes so long to get here. Exhibit 4 on page 15 provides similar information for general fund expenditures. For the year, total expenditures were $83.9 million, or 89.8% of the authorized appropriations. I'm pleased to report that once again for this fiscal year, all general fund budget units came in under their budgeted amounts. Available year-end fund balance was used to address the approximate $418,000 2011 and 12 shortfall that I discussed 2 weeks ago on the first quarter report. In addition, $3,355,000 has been set aside per City Council Policy 200-19, the use of year-end fund balance, to address the current year's structural deficit. Exhibit 6 on page 17 of the staff report provides a detail of all the various general fund balances, reserves, and designations. I'd be happy to answer any questions that this council may have.
Mayor Pro Tem Aguilera.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Mr. Nielsen for showing up and clarifying everything. I know I had some questions about the balancing last time, and you proved me, you proved yourself right that you would make it balance. I just want to note that, the 89% of expenditures is a really good number, particularly in these times. And with all the questions we've had tonight about should we spend this or spend that, I think it's an indication that there has been a lot of thought in our spending process, and we've actually saved money on our budget over the last year. So I appreciate seeing the numbers, and I thank you for your work.
Thank you. Yeah, the departments have been working really hard, as they always do, on making sure that they're spending the funds that you allot to them in the best way that they can. One other thing I'd like to point out, that $83.9 million seems like compared to prior years, a somewhat extraordinarily high number, but that a lot of that has to do, really about 20 million of it deals with, you may recall, the land purchases that the city purchased from the redevelopment agency last winter. So, if you were to kind of pull that out of the whole formula, that number would drop by about $20 million.
Okay, thank you.
Sir.
Thank you. Councilmember Lopez.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for going over this last 2 weeks ago with me. It helps me quite a bit. Property taxes, they're down.
They are down. They came in about 3% less than what we originally anticipated, yes.
So sales tax is up what?
Sales tax, I believe, was up, hang on just a moment, please. Sales tax actually came in about close to 16% more than we originally budgeted it. You may recall in the 9-10 fiscal year, we reduced sales tax revenue estimates in that year due to the recession and as things as we saw them. We took that year's estimate down $750,000. Because of that whole situation, we were very conservative when we were preparing the 10-11 budget with our sales tax revenue estimate, because we didn't want to get into that same situation again. Fortunately, during the course of the fiscal year, we saw things start to pick up a bit, and hopefully they'll continue. I'm cautiously optimistic.
So the difference between the lower property taxes and higher sales tax, we're still a little above what we what we anticipated?
Yeah, the sales tax in excess of the budgetary estimate more than made up the underage in property tax revenues.
Our different departments were able to save, the different departments were able to save some money?
Yeah, I mean, we all budget very tight as it is. I mean, over the years, I've been here a number of years, and things just have gotten progressively more difficult to budget for as the needs are always increasing. The demand for the public services are always there as the city population goes up and we have more requirements placed upon us by the state. And yet city staff seems to come through and, sharpen the pencils every year and make do with what we have, and hopefully have a little left over.
Yeah, I want to thank our staff for really tightening up the belt and, working those numbers, because they know it's tough out there, and I appreciate that, staff. So in your opinion, as we're finishing up this year, we'll finish up a little better, maybe we thought, maybe a little bit better, and going into next year, you've been here a long time, you've seen a lot of ups and downs. We'll be okay?
I think we're going to be okay. I'm not quite sure how far I want to climb out on that branch at this point in time. But once again, when we were preparing the 11-12 budget, we were very careful in our estimates, hoping for some improvement, but not planning on too much. Yeah. And, here we are calendar-wise, we're into the 5th month of the year, and we're seeing some revenues that are doing a little bit better than others, and some that aren't doing quite as well as we thought we would. When you look at the exhibit that I prepare that is general fund revenues, it's all of the general fund revenues. They're presented on 2 pages, but in reality, there's about 190 individual revenue accounts that make up the general fund. I mean, I'm bundling them together in broad categories when I present to you. So I don't think anyone is good enough to do revenue estimates on that many accounts and have them all come, dead on. So, we're always over a little on some and always under on some others. And like I said, hopefully with the planning we do, things come out okay.
One question, one more. The ½ cent.
Yes.
How are we doing on that?
Like with our regular sales tax, that came in a little better than we originally budgeted for, and all of those funds are set aside within a reserve. If you look on Exhibit 6, the various fund balances, you'll find a line item there for Proposition L revenues. That without looking right now, I think there's about $8 million in there. But on the other hand, we have the debt service on the 2007 certificates of participation that were issued to build the community projects. And the council is committed at least through the 12-13 fiscal year to put about $1.2 million a year towards the fire department. And we included a kind of a cash flow schedule for Proposition L within the report this year, and we'll have that every quarter. I wouldn't expect it to change too much on a quarter-to-quarter basis, but our current Prop L projections should take us through, I believe, the 21-22 fiscal year to be able to cover all the debt service. And that's using very conservative revenue estimates, so I fully anticipate by the time we get out there into that range that the revenues will be there to cover the debt service.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Aguilera, did you want a clarification?
Yeah, I just want a clarification on one of the answers you gave, Mr.
Yes.
Lopez. You said that our sales tax increased by 16%. Where would I find that?
If you go to Exhibit 2 on page 9.
And I'd like to also add another clarification. That's 16% over budgeted number, but it's really 8.75% over the prior year actual, which is still about 10 to 12% off of the mark from 3 years ago. But so we budget as Mr. Nielsen stated conservatively, and that it came in higher than what we budgeted, and then it was about half of that over the prior year receipts.
Okay. And then so the 12% that's on page 6 is just for that quarter, is that right? Page 6 of 22 on sales tax?
Yeah, that is simply a
Yes.
quarter comparison to kind of gauge how we were doing this year at this time compared to last year at last time. One should not try to extrapolate that into a full year.
Right.
But you can find the specifics of what you were asking about on page 9. You go, what's that, about 4 or 5 lines down. You'll see what the actuals were in the prior year, and then what we budgeted and what we received in the current year.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Gronke.
You know, in these times, there's so little opportunity to receive additional revenues, but I noticed our TOT was up pretty significantly so. And we have another hotel coming on. Will that affect this year's revenue, or will that be?
We have, I'm sorry, I do not know when the Hyatt is scheduled to open. Isn't that in the spring, I think, of this year?
They had originally anticipated February is what they'd stated, but we're looking at later in the spring. And so April, May, probably a better target date. We might see just a very little receipts in this fiscal year from that opening.
Okay, so really, basically, that'll roll into next year then?
Yes.
We'll budget for a full year of TOT on that hotel.
Okay.
And I would, point out that new hotel that's out there now, the transient occupancy tax that we're receiving from that pretty much matches all of the other hotels that we have combined.
Good. So they have pretty good occupancy rate there.
They're doing well.
Okay. Yeah, the other thing is, I don't like to make advertisements, but I've been to the living spaces, and I can only think that that's going to generate quite a bit of revenue for us.
We certainly hope so.
Okay.
Too soon to tell.
Yeah. The last thing I want to say is that, the expenditures are down, but I can't help but think that's probably partly due to some of the loss of personnel that we've had over this year.
Yes.
It's a sad note, but I think that some of the reasons that we have spent less is because we have less people on the job right now.
Yes, our staffing costs are down.
Thank you.
Councilmember Coles.
Thank you. Yeah, I was very pleased after several long meetings and workshops in trying to get a budget adopted for this year and looking out at the future and the prospect of another major structural deficit that we would have to address. I was most pleased to see that structural deficit is projected to be down from what we were anticipating 6 months ago. So, and as much as elected people like to take credit for, we cut and we did, I give staff credit, I give leadership credit, because we take your recommendations to do what we need to do to keep our budget intact and balanced. And so I appreciate the work that your office does and the work that the leadership in the departments do to help us keep in line. And when I look at the under budget expenditures thus far this year in each of the divisions, it means that people are tightening their belts. And I want to second Councilmember Gronke's sadness that we've had to lose staff in this process, and I hope that we will be able to rebuild some of those positions as times get better, because those were, many of them, vital roles that support our community, support a lot of the services that we have provided and have had to cut back. So I want to thank you again for what I see as a light at the end of the tunnel, and at least some hope that we have. I too was, you don't think of Vista as having a transient occupancy tax source like San Diego or some of the other coastal communities, but we're growing there, and I think a lot of that's due to our proximity with the activity and the nature of the business park and the people that draws in for their work and for their meetings. Also, we're close to some of the coastal activities such as Legoland and the beach, and people can find maybe a little less expensive accommodations 5 miles or 4 miles away, and so hopefully we'll see this continue to flourish as a part of our base of support. So thank you. And do we have to move to adopt this, or is it just for presentation?
I think you need no motion on it? Yes.
I'll move to approve or adopt.
I'll second it.
Okay. And before we vote, I'd just like to thank too staff and you and all of our leaders in our city that have done this. It's great that they cut their expenses. I'm just very proud of all of them and all of you. So Councilmember Coles said it very well. So I think we're ready to vote then. Everybody, please cast your votes. Motion passes unanimously. Our
Thank you.
last thing on our tonight is our discussion item regarding our general plan 2030 and our zoning changes. And then I have, after that, we have a couple oral communication speakers. Mr. Conley is going to give us a report. Sorry.
It's okay. Thank you, Mayor and Council. John Conley, Community Development Director. This is the last of what I hope is several meetings on the general plan update. Provided you a lot of little pieces of the plan as we've moved forward here over the last couple years. Number of meetings on the land use and circulation elements. Tonight is the zoning, the zoning changes that we're implementing as part of the general plan update. So I wanted to just review it with you and provide you some information on what we're doing as part of that update. We discussed this with the Planning Commission last month and got some input from them, which I'll provide some feedback for you as part of the presentation. But essentially, I wanted to cover three things tonight. One is the preparation and adoption of a new zoning map. The second is to cover a mixed-use zone that we're going to be presenting as part of the general plan update. And the final issue is a biological preserve overlay, which is an overlay that we'll implement as part of our zoning map to protect biological resources. The zoning map would replace a number of hard copy maps that we currently have on file in the planning department. They're Mylar maps that are hung in a file that we pull out when customers come to the counter as our official zoning maps. So they require handwritten changes and drafting changes to make amendments to them, and it's very labor intensive and they're very difficult to use in terms of providing general information. So the intent is to prepare and adopt an electronic map, a GIS-based map that we've prepared that's provided in your packet. That map will implement the opportunity areas that we've covered in the general plan so far with you that are land use changes proposed in the land use element. And it will implement the mixed-use zone and the biological preserve overlay that I'll cover with you tonight, as well as mapping several schools and public properties not within that area as civic activity, and I'll cover that as well. Another thing that we're trying to accomplish with the zoning map is to eliminate several of our specific plans. A specific plan is an area that has zoning standards in and of itself that are not covered by our general zoning designations. If someone comes to our counter and wants information on that area, we have to pull out that plan and review those standards with them separately from our zoning code. And because of the number of specific plans that we have, it's difficult to provide that information in a quick and efficient manner. In addition, a number of the specific plans that the city has on file were adopted years ago and essentially adopted standard zoning requirements with some different street designations. So we've reviewed all of those plans and we'll be bringing forward a recommendation to eliminate those that are no longer necessary and can be replaced by standard zoning. In addition, we'll be implementing a mixed-use zone. We've discussed this on several occasions. Essentially, it will allow for a mix of residential and or commercial, generally near the city's core or near transportation corridors associated with the Sprinter or with major bus lines. The mixed-use zone will work in combination with the downtown specific plan, which is shown in the inset down in the right-hand corner of the slide here, so that the downtown core area as well as the major transportation corridor along North Santa Fe and some specific locations near the Sprinter Station on North Melrose, near the courthouse on South Melrose, and along Civic Center Drive, which are shown in the slide in blue, will be designated mixed use. These are areas that are all have been shown in the proposed land use element that we've reviewed with you in past meetings. One other area that we're potentially going to add as a mixed-use zone is the area in what I call southern South Santa Fe Avenue. This is the area that's shown in the red on the slide here, which is essentially the area that's south of Monte Vista Drive and extends down to Cypress and Mar Vista Drive. On what is the right side of the slide, which is the east side, is the area around Service Place and along South Santa Fe where there's several existing commercial uses. On the other side of the street is the area extending south of Mar Vista Drive. There are a number of vacant lots in this area as well as a number of existing commercial uses. When we presented this issue to this topic to the Planning Commission last month, One of the property owners that owns a major commercial center down in this area approached the commission and staff and requested that we consider a mixed-use zone in this area based on the number of commercial businesses that exist down there at this time. His concern was that rezoning it to residential, which is what's currently proposed, would create a non-conforming use situation for them, and based on the amount that they've invested in the property and the long-term vision for use of the property, that would create a serious hardship for them. And the staff generally agrees there are a number of viable commercial uses down there. The original intent was to eliminate some of the less desirable commercial uses and replace them with higher density residential uses, but we'd also like to allow for the continuation of those commercial uses that we feel are viable. The representative is the center that has the Sunrise Cafe in it, which is, I'm sure most of you are familiar with, is a fairly well-developed and well-maintained center. And so in the interest of those property owners, we're proposing to add this area as mixed use. We are also proposing to maintain the densities in this area that are currently proposed. And so the orange is shown as 15 units to the acre maximum. The brown is 21 units to the acre maximum, so not as high a density as what's considered with the mixed-use designation as a whole, which is 40 units to the acre. So lower residential densities will still allow for multifamily development at a lower density as we're currently proposing, but will also allow for the continuation of what we feel are some viable commercial uses in this area. So that's the staff recommendation this evening, and we'd like the City Council's input as to whether or not they support that change. That would be the final land use change that would occur to the map before we bring it forward for final adoption, which we're anticipating in February or March of next year. The mixed-use zone is provided in your packet, starting on page 5. It's fairly extensive zoning designation, so I'm not going to get into the details, but it does list the permitted uses and the special and minor uses. These are largely consistent with what's included in the downtown specific plan, which was adopted last year in April, providing for a range of retail and service uses consistent with the downtown area that are intended to mix well with residential. So heavier commercial uses like outdoor storage, things like that, are not permitted, but a range of retail and service uses that would mix with residential efficiently are included as permitted uses. And there are some special and minor uses that are proposed where we would need some special considerations for noise or air quality, things like that, to make sure that they mix well with residential uses. There are a number of development standards included in the zone. A maximum density of 40 units per acre is recommended. The only area that we're recommending for a lower density than that is along Civic Center Drive, where we'd recommend a density of 30 units per acre. And this is based on the topography and the existing uses along Civic Center Drive, where we don't feel that 4 stories would mix well with the adjacent residential uses. A minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet is recommended. There are limited setbacks to allow for uses to be constructed up along the right-of-way so that there's storefronts along the street consistent with what you see on Main Street to create a more downtown pedestrian-friendly environment. Building height is recommended at 60 feet or 4 stories, which is also consistent with the downtown specific plan. Again, this is different on Civic Center Drive, where we're recommending a maximum building height of 45 feet or 3 stories to maintain some consistency with the adjacent residential uses, but also to account for the topography in that area. Finally, there are a number of performance standards recommended to control things like noise and air quality and potentially noxious uses that could affect the residential development within that zone. These are some pictures of some different mixed-use developments. I'm sure you're familiar with the concept: retail on the ground floor, residential above. This is consistent with what we are recommending on the demonstration block, which was recommended earlier. The idea is to create a pedestrian-friendly environment to allow for residential uses above where people can live in the downtown district, and it's consistent again with what we've proposed and what's been approved in the downtown specific plan. One of the issues that was brought up as a concern before we brought this forward, and we discussed it at the Planning Commission as well, is parking. There are some reduced parking standards that are recommended as part of the mixed-use zone, and that's to account for the fact that the majority of these zones would be in the vicinity of transportation corridors where alternative transportation modes would be provided, near the Sprinter station, near high-frequency bus lines. This is consistent with regional direction to accommodate smart growth and accommodate density near transportation corridors. So the staff is recommending some reduced parking standards from what would normally be required in our multifamily zones. The standards that we're using are still fairly conservative. What we base them on is the City of San Diego's multifamily standards, which are lower than ours, but still provide a fairly high parking ratio for the use to accommodate the residences and the retail. One of the things that we've allowed for is the shared use of parking between commercial and residential uses, so the commercial spaces that are not used at night can be used by guests of the residential units, and so that allows for a reduction in parking. We also included allowance for modifications to the parking standards through the entitlement process, so the projects that come forward before the Planning Commission or the City Council can ask for reductions in parking if they have a parking study that staff supports that shows that there really can be reduced and accommodate the uses that are proposed. And we've seen a number of projects come forward within the last few years that are asking for those types of changes, so we feel that allowing for those modifications at the discretion of the Planning Commission or the City Council is something that should be considered. We've also received a number of comments on the mixed-use zone, and I'll just briefly review those with you. There were some concerns about access to dwelling units. We had originally written the code to require that units above the third floor include an elevator. That was essentially intended to account for mixed-use development where you have commercial on the ground floor and you have to get residences through that commercial zone up to the second or third story. It wasn't intended to account for residential-only projects, and so some of the residential-only developers that are interested in doing residential projects expressed some concern about that. The building code requires an elevator for 4 stories or above, and we feel that would be consistent to allow for in a residential-only project, but that 3 stories and below should be allowed to have access with stairways, which is allowed by the building code. So we modified that standard after the Planning Commission considered it. We discussed parking ratios and density. Again, we're allowing for shared parking, and there was some discussion about that. We discussed a number of issues related to Civic Center Drive based on its topography and the existing development patterns that are out there. And so we've made some recommendations for some increased setbacks and development standards to address the construction of new projects along Civic Center Drive so that it blends better with the adjacent residential uses. We will be bringing back some design guidelines to the council after the general plan is amended to discuss specific parameters associated with mixed-use development. Our current design guidelines address commercial and address multifamily separately, but we don't have guidelines right now in our code that address the mixed-use components, so we'll be bringing back a set of those to make sure that we have high-quality development. And finally, inclusionary housing requirements. Some of the developers that are interested in doing projects have asked about inclusionary housing. We have recommended that we include an inclusionary requirement of 6% of the units to be affordable or low-income units, and that's consistent with what our multifamily standards currently are. So we feel that we're being consistent with other development within the city. The final issue that I wanted to cover with you tonight is our biological preserve overlay. This is in response to comments on our general plan that we received during the EIR process from the wildlife agencies. The city has signed into and is a partner with other North County cities in the Multiple Habitat Conservation Plan, otherwise known as the MHCP. This is an umbrella document that regionally identifies open space corridors for the movement of wildlife and the preservation of open space. The initial meetings on this topic asked all the cities to adopt plans where they would implement open space designations within their cities and allow for the management and maintenance of those areas consistent with certain standards that are identified in this plan. Unfortunately, the majority of cities that have evaluated this have determined that it's not cost effective for us to do that. There's an extremely high cost associated with managing these areas, which requires, under the guidelines that are recommended by SANDAG, to have biologists go out and do surveys of these areas to guarantee that certain species are thriving within these areas. So maintenance, or maintaining them in a standard state, making sure that the access is controlled and the trash is cleaned up, and the things that we normally do are things that we intended to continue doing. But management in terms of making sure that certain biological resources are preserved is the cost considerations are too high for us to do at this time. At the time that the MHCP was adopted, there was a promise to the region that there would be a funding source provided by SANDAG through Transnet or some other tax measure to pay for this implementation. Unfortunately, that hasn't come to fruition. So the cities are left to fund it on their own, and as I said before, none of the North County cities, with the exception of Carlsbad, have stepped up to the plate and agreed to do that, because they've all identified exactly as we have that they can't afford to do that. So we're recommending that we include an overlay in our general plan that will establish a preserve consistent with what the MHCP identified, establish some maintenance standards, again, consistent with what the MHCP identified, but wait to implement the management standards when we have an adequate funding source to do so. So the biological preserve overlay essentially replaces our plan that Sandag asked us to do, but implement some standards in effect to preserve the natural open space areas that we have in the city that are left that we intend to maintain. As an aside, the majority of these lands are all city-owned, so there's no issue in terms of purchasing additional land or providing additional funds to compensate private property owners that have open space on them. So there's not a cost to the city to do this, but it will preserve these areas in perpetuity and provide some, hopefully to the satisfaction of the wildlife agencies, some protection of these areas for the future. And that completes my staff presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
We have one speaker. Would you like to hear the speaker?
Sure.
I'm J.C. Wynn. Says no position.
Hello, Mayor and Council and staff and everybody. I was sitting here listening to this long make plans for the future list, and a couple things I just want to share that I constantly hear my wife complaining about in the development of our downtown so far is parking is a nightmare on the weekends at times, you know. And she really feels like perhaps that's why the California Pizza Kitchen went out of business, because they couldn't find nobody that could park close enough and they didn't want to walk or whatever. That's her scenario. She says we should consider a parking structure similar to the one in Oceanside there in their downtown by their Sprinter station and all that stuff, where you can got 3 or 4 levels where a lot of people can park in a small little area. And listening also into his overlay of their thing, we should consider multiple families living in our multiple use development that's going to go on down there. And there's going to be a lot of cars that if we cut parking, we're going to be having a disaster down there, because people won't be able to stop and shop and eat and park, because, you know, you have multiple families living in our multiple use buildings and multiple cars parking in very few spots. Also, my suggestion is don't rely on what, you know, San Marcos or San Diego or everybody else doing. Have your original vision, you know, let's be Vista and wow the public, you know, because when we come up with something original, you know, the public will tend to respond and clap and congratulate, you know. And development's a good thing if it's done right, and it could be not a very good thing if we don't really think about the little stuff. So anyway, that's my, thank you.
Thanks, J.C. Councilmember Grunke?
Let's imagine a world that doesn't have redevelopment. So what happens with those businesses down in that commercial area? You know, because I've taken my cars down there a number of times that haven't worked on. Do we have opportunities to keep them in town if we wanted to build on those properties and they wanted to sell and so forth? Are there still opportunities for us to assist them in relocation within our city?
Absolutely. If they want to stay there, first of all, they can stay there.
I understand.
And the code allows them to stay there as long as they want to without any ramifications. The issue would be is if they vacated the use for 6 months or more, then they would have to revert back to the proposed zoning that we're identifying tonight. So typically when properties turn over like that, a purchaser comes in, buys the land, and continues the use. As long as that continues without a 6-month lap in the use, they can continue forever. There's no sunset unless the city takes specific action to sunset the use. If the city wants to relocate them, we have the ability to sit down with the property owner and discuss relocation and try to assist them in that effort. There are a number of zoning designations throughout the city that can accommodate those uses, and so that's certainly an opportunity. We don't envision that having to happen as a result of this action tonight, We envision that the majority of uses that are out there and thriving and continue to thrive will be able to do so even under the new zoning. The issue for them will be they won't be able to expand their use or build new facilities on their property under the current zoning or under the zoning that's proposed. They'll only be able to maintain their use as it is today.
And the business owners that there expressed a concern that they possibly want to expand in the future?
None of them have approached us so far.
Okay. I can't envision that because I'm pretty familiar with the area, but
The majority of those properties are built out to the extent that they could under our current code.
Okay, okay. So I feel comfortable in taking that action. Let's talk about Civic Center Drive. You talked about the reduction in height, the reduction in densities and so forth. To me, that's still a residential area and doesn't really fit the parameter of smart growth and being close to a major hub like our Sprinter line and so forth, like you see on Santa Fe. So just a concern about that, and I just want to express that concern. When we talk about smart growth and we talk about its impact on the local residents, we would have something that would be maybe only 2 stories, possibly 3, depending on the topography. Is that what you said?
On Civic Center Drive specifically,
Yes.
we're recommending
Specifically, just
the
we're talking about
allowance.
Civic Center Drive right now.
The allowance of 3 stories is what's currently recommended.
And the densities there would be as high as 15 units per acre?
As high as 30 units per acre under the current recommendation.
As high as what?
30 units per
Yes,
acre.
yeah, I would reduce that. I would ask that you reduce that. Or at least that would be my suggestion. Because it is a kind of a quasi-residential area. It does have a 4-lane highway going through it, but it still has that feel about it. The other question deals with developing. You've talked to a number of developers over the years, and in particular with mixed-use products. Have you heard about the possibilities of having commercial down below and having less than for sale units of above, possible apartments above commercial properties? Is that some product that developers are approaching us with?
Absolutely. That's where the market is right now. There's a number of apartment builders that are approaching the city because apartments are renting at high rates.
Okay, okay. And the last thing I have deals with, again, in a world without redevelopment, are developers still willing to come in and work along these corridors, these mixed-use corridors?
Right now, I would say no.
Okay.
The economy doesn't lend itself to that. We're hopeful that redevelopment can continue and that will help facilitate that process through the work that we're going to do on Paseo Santa Fe and getting some developers interested in doing some projects down there by assembling some land and making it more attractive. If that goes away, we need to really sit down and think about what other alternatives we have and how we can best attract those developers. Maybe it's through some incentives, maybe it's through changing the zoning to allow projects to move forward at a quicker rate. But I think that really needs to be discussed in a public forum to figure out what our best options are if redevelopment can't move forward, because in this market, it's not happening. Time will tell.
Yeah, I'm again concerned if redevelopment goes away that our opportunity as a city to hold them to some building standards, some quality building standards, may be diminished. And again, that presents a real problem if we're going to really dress up our downtown area.
I believe that the design standards that we're going to bring back to the council after we adopt the general plan will address that from a perspective of what's going to look nice. As far as cost considerations, there are always things you can do to trim costs off and still have a project look nice, but from the staff's perspective, we want to make it as high quality a project as we can, and that's the intent of the design guidelines, to force developers down that road.
Okay. I know there's some people from the planning department out or planning commission, so I hope you hear my concerns and take them into note. Thank you.
We have Pro Tem Aguilera, followed by Councilmember Lopez.
Thank you. I just attended a SANDAG meeting where they recently approved a mitigation program, like a large-scale mitigation program. Is that what you're referring to? I mean, is that one of the reasons that we're not going to get some of the monies that we need for this biological preserve?
No, that is affiliated with the highway improvements and the regional road improvements that they're doing as part of the regional transportation plan. So they have a number of biological impacts that are occurring as a result of that program. And so they've identified mitigation on a regional basis for those impacts, and they're funding that through the regional funding sources. But it's different from this funding source.
That came from Transnet too, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
And that was part of the Transnet proposal all along. When they started discussions on the MHCP, the promise to the cities was, we're going to require you to do these things, but we're going to fund it. So you're not going to have to worry, cities, about pulling money out of your general fund to make this happen. That hasn't come to pass, but there's still been a lot of pressure on the cities to implement the plans. And we don't feel it's appropriate to move forward with a plan unless we have an identified funding source. And at this point, we don't feel we have the ability to do that through our general fund.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Lopez.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a whole mess of things, John. First of all, I got to compliment you on, I don't know how you can remember all these things. You know, you just rattle off, you know, and it's just a lot to know there. I commend you for that. The biological habitat areas, I understand, and I think it's good. But I have a question. Down by the BMW, you show a small trail along the sidewalk. Will, down the road, when we have the Conservancy doing their trails down through there, does this leave, is that open for them to be able to do that?
The biological preserve overlay will allow for trails. That's one of the few improvements within those areas that will be allowed, essentially passive uses that will allow for the maintenance of those open space areas, which essentially is utilities and trails. So those are two uses that will be permitted within the overlay.
So it is permitted in the overlay?
Correct.
Thank you. Now, on your overlay in Shadow Ridge behind the fire station, you have a couple 100 acres or 100 acres or so of a preserve there. Now, on that, on your overlay, I noticed that the wildlife and not wildlife, but the shrubs and all that are real close to those homes. Does this stop people from actually cutting back let's say 100 feet or something away from the fence area so that there is no fires if there is a fire in the future?
That's an excellent question. We have actually accounted for that 100-foot buffer between the private property lines and the edge of the overlay so that we can allow for thinning or removal of vegetation within the fire management zones adjacent to private property.
Because it didn't show it on the map.
It's at a really small scale. It's hard to see, but if you get into a close-up look at it on GIS, we've allowed for a 100-foot buffer around any residential or private properties, also in the business park.
Okay, maybe I better change my glasses, huh? Okay, now you go back to the R.E. DeYoung property. I noticed that you have, it's almost half is partially overlay, the overlay. Now, the way you have it marked there now, is that the way it's going to be, or is it open to do either way, either west or east, a line through there, to his property?
You're speaking of Green Oak Ranch?
Green Oak Ranch.
So we have included a portion of Green Oak Ranch. The overlay was based on mapping that was done by Sandag for the regional plan. That basically evaluated all natural habitat regardless of ownership. The city, in going through this process, has removed the majority of private lands because that would compel us to purchase those lands or restrict development on those properties for private owners, which we don't want to do. We have had discussions with the owner of Green Oak Ranch about proposing the overlay on his property, and we're in discussions with them right now to make sure that they're okay with that approach. Their initial response has been, it looks like it will work for them, but we won't take this forward, including their land on the map, until we have confirmation from them that that's not going to be a problem for them in the future.
Okay, so it is there in negotiations now?
Correct. We're showing it now based on our initial discussions. If it results in a problem for them down the road, we'll remove it, and it will only show the parklands.
Okay, thank you. Parking is definitely a problem. You're absolutely right. I made a commitment to the downtown folks that we would eventually have a parking structure down there. Whenever we have a run down there or anything that goes on in downtown Vista, there's never enough parking. We work very hard, the city works very hard with the VBA and the chamber to produce different things, events, so that we can bring business to our community. But what has happened is people, surrounding communities say, no, there's no parking there, why go? So we're kind of like spinning our wheels. I think that we need to next year, start looking at working with the VBA of some type of plan to start working on a parking structure. We have bought some property for structure, but without parking, really, you can't do business. You have to have parking to do business. And now coming down to the density, I was down in La Mesa, and they had a project down there that they had, I went down to look at, that it had high density, but it was a beautiful project. It was next to the rail, and sometimes, you want to say, well, I don't want to, have high density, but what happens is that you get a developer who will develop a beautiful project, and it might take 30 units per acre instead of 20. So, I think we need to leave that, continue to leave it open, because then what you do is you cut off the potential beautiful development that can actually go in there. So I would not really cut that down at this time. So that's my opinion. We also looked at possibly down the road that in our plans that we were going to have a trolley. I hope that we continue to have that vision of having a small trolley down through Vista, because I think, like you said, we need to be unique. Unique brings people to our community. As far as the high density on the Santa Fe corridor, do we have in our ordinance or on our plan that we can actually do underground in that area? Let's say you go half a building down, then you come in and you put dirt around and put your landscape in, and you see maybe part of the parking structure and not the whole structure. Is that allowed here in our city, John?
Absolutely.
It is.
Underground parking is not prohibited or restricted in any way.
Mm-hmm. Well, we need to look at also when we build some of these buildings, is it in plans so that, for instance, the building on a demonstration block, is it in our code or whatever that all four sides would be required to have a nice look instead of just a wall? Is it still in there, John?
Yes.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Okay,
Well,
that's.
I got a lot of questions to ask.
Do we have any other speakers? My only thing, and I can add one little thing, because I was looking at the mixed-use zone, and I was looking at the parking requirements. For the studio, 1 space per unit plus 0.25 guest space, 1 bedroom, 1 space per unit plus 0.5 guest space, 2 bedroom, 2 spaces. But I worry because people nowadays have more cars, and so a 1 bedroom would probably have 2 cars. So, the husband and the wives are working in a lot of families, and in a 2 bedroom, I would even think 2 cars plus maybe part of a guest space. I think these parking spaces are in my opinion, are low. But I know the developers don't like, it takes more land to make more parking, but it just seems like that it should be more required in that area. And then the only other thing I was looking at, I see it says shopping cart storage. Why do we have shopping cart storage? Is that for the shopping carts that people push home from the store?
That's with the intent that a supermarket wants to go in the zone. We want to make sure that they have an area set aside.
It's for a supermarket? I'm thinking it's for a bill. I was thinking it's for a residence. I'm like, why in the world would we do that? Okay, that's very clear. Thank you. That clarified that. Okay, it looks like I have Councilmember Cole.
One
Coles,
quick
and then-
comment. Parking always is a problem, but part of the smart growth planning is that we develop residential areas close to mass transit, close to places where we encourage people not to waste all of our valuable surface space in areas like this with parking. And so while I get frustrated as anybody when I can't find a parking place, but anything to really allow us to encourage use of affordable and economical and efficient public transportation is also something that we have to keep in mind.
Okay, but I think it's also, I would say, the chicken and the egg thing,
Yeah.
because until we get transit running often enough to enough
Right.
places that you can take it
Right.
every often, then you got to have your car. And
Right.
even in San Diego, because I'm a realtor and I've showed a lot of condos down there, the ones that have, some of them have no parking. There's no place for your car, so you have to rent a place down the street or whatever. And so people don't want to buy those because they might work downtown San Diego, but then they want to come out and visit somebody in Escondido or Oceanside, and the transit doesn't run that often. So,
yeah.
and you don't take.
No, you're right. It is a
So-
chicken and egg argument, but
Yeah, but I would say, in Vista, because I see apartments when I show homes and apartments and things, condos, it's always underparked. There's always people overflowing onto the streets and parking in the streets and things. So that's my thing about that is I just think it's better to have more than enough parking than it is to overflow onto the streets. So anyway, sorry. Okay, so I'll stop. Councilmember Lopez, followed by Mayor Pro Tem Aguilera.
I'll make it quick. I agree with you on that, Mayor Ritter, is that you go to a lot of these, especially Shadow Ridge. You go into a street in Shadow Ridge, you can't even park on the streets over there. I don't know who made those laws back there, but that's not a very good selling point, that when you do that. But I think that we should, I know developers are not going to like it, but look at increasing the parking on those developments, either away from it a little bit, in the project, but increase that somehow, either 3 or, right now, what is it, 2.5 or something like that? What is it, John?
It depends on the number of bedrooms that you want to build, is what our parking standards are based on. Number of parking spaces depends on the number of bedrooms in each unit. So our standards right now in our multifamily zone are fairly high, much higher than what was required when Shadow Ridge was built. The Shadow Ridge specific plan allowed for reductions in parking, probably in an effort to attract development, exactly as we're talking about tonight. So yes, it does create problems when it's done in the wrong area. The intent with these guidelines is to allow two things. One, you're going to be next to transit, so you're going to have an alternative. And 20 or 30 years down the road, I don't think people are going to have 3 or 4 cars for, a 2-bedroom home. But that's just my opinion. The other issue is that you have mixed-use development, so you have residential and commercial within close proximity to each other. The intent is that people can walk or ride their bikes to shop or get the things they need to do for some of their smaller trips rather than having to get in their car and drive everywhere. So that's kind of some of the premises of what the reduced parking standards are for. If you increase the parking standards for mixed-use development, the bottom line is it just makes it harder to attract mixed-use development.
So on a 3 and a 2, what's the ratio?
A 3 and a 2, meaning a 3-bedroom unit?
Yeah.
I believe our standards right now for a 3-bedroom is somewhere around 4.5 spaces.
4.5 spaces? Whoa.
So it says in here, John, 3 or more bedrooms,
I'm
2
sorry.
spaces
That's
per
what's
unit.
in our mixed. That's what's in our multifamily standards in our current zoning. So if you built a condo today under our current standards, not in the mixed-use zone, you would have much higher parking ratios than what you have in this zone.
And in this mixed-use zone, so that you're doing it that way, so they can. There's other shared parking that they can use also, as
That's
we're saying.
correct.
At night, the people when they come home, there's the retail might not be open, so they can share some of that parking? Is that what a thought is?
That's the intent, and of course, those issues would be evaluated and approved on a project-specific basis. So it's not an outright allowance, it's allowance with approval of the Planning Commission or the council.
Okay. So that, okay, Mayor Pro Tem Aguilera.
That was one of my questions, was about the shared parking. Maybe you could expand on that a little bit more. But I think the other thing that people need to consider is when you do have extra parking, it also encourages multiple families to use the properties, and that's not our intent, I don't think, in that area. So I think by restricting parking, I think we're helping that problem that we already have in this city. So I think it's kind of like if you build them, they will come. And that's what we've done in this city in the past with 4.5. I mean, I think that was a sound of surprise. That's a lot of parking for a 3-bedroom. You're automatically inviting a situation where a 3-bedroom becomes a place for 2 or 3 families. So I think that's something to consider. I know that Planning Commission has considered that as well, as I know the people on there, and I know staff as well. So I support it. I think you guys are heading in the right direction. I think Planning Commission has done a good job on this. Maybe with just a little more explanation on the shared parking so people would be comfortable with that.
Sure. The way it's set up is each unit has a certain number of spaces that are required for the unit that have to be provided on site and have to be dedicated to the residential use. So basically, for each bedroom, you have a space that's dedicated to that unit that has to be parked individual and be dedicated to that parking space for that unit. Then there are guest spaces for those units. The guest spaces can be shared. So you can have them off-site, or you can have them on the same project that can be dedicated to commercial use, so that a commercial business that has customers coming during the day could use those spaces, and at night when the businesses are closed, the guests of the residents that live in that unit could come and park in those commercial spaces, so they're shared between the uses dependent upon the time of day that they're used. That's the intent of the shared parking. Again, it's not something that's going to be allowed outright. Each project is going to be evaluated for its specific parking allowances, and the shared parking considerations will be addressed through each project approval.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lopez.
One more question came up. John, Mr. Conley, excuse me. When we're making our new ordinances, and let's say you have a house, a tract home, a new one, and all of a sudden you have a couple of families move in, and you have a double-car garage or a single, and then you get off your car and you walk into your home. Now, to the side of it, you have lawn and you have landscaping and you have a nice little fence. Now, in many areas I see, in tract areas now, they're taking the lawn out, putting concrete in there, and allowing 2 more cars and several more families in a house. Our new ordinances, do they stop all that? Is that allowed?
Nothing that we're proposing as part of the general plan update addresses that. Our current code addresses it, though. We do have lot coverage standards, so there's a certain percentage of a lot that you can cover with impermeable surfaces like parking areas, and I believe it's 60%. So a percentage of the lot has to be maintained as landscaped or permeable surfaces. People aren't allowed to park in their front yards off the driveway or off the pavement. So if there are those situations occurring, it's a code violation, and we can handle it through our code enforcement department.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay, so that concludes that. Do we need a motion on this, or is this information only?
Said it was just for receive a presentation. We just received it.
Do we have any? Are there any changes? If we don't have any, if there's no changes, then it's just information only, unless there be some changes. So we're okay. We all okay?
I'm okay.
We're all looking at you.
I have Councilmember Gronke's comment on reducing the building height and density along Civic Center Drive.
Thank you so
Is
much.
that something
Yes.
that the council's interested in seeing?
I thought 30 units per acre was a little excessive for that particular area.
But is that a consensus?
Well, that's my suggestion. That's your discussion if you want to have it.
So the next lower category in our zoning code would be 21 units to the acre, which is essentially a two-story product, kind of consistent with what you'd see down in Shadow Ridge, for example, in the multifamily developments.
Everybody, wake up.
To me, 30 units per acre is an apartment, whereas, you know, a rather dense apartment unit. And so I'd like to think that this is it's adjacent to residential areas, and so I think we'd want to reduce it somewhat. And it's really not close to mass transit as much as the other units, other areas are.
It's on a main road. No, I have Councilmember Lopez.
Well, you know,
Push the button again.
that's the entrance to Vista. And most of those properties, let's say from Rodeo's, where their market is, clear up to the trailer park, those whole areas are all going to be bought out.
He's talking about Civic Center, right here. Right here,
Civic Center.
yeah.
Civic Center.
This is essentially the area on Civic Center Drive from the Vaughn Center to City Hall, over the hill.
I'll agree with
It's
you on
mixed
that.
use, kind of, I mean, it already is kind of, it's kind of a mishmash.
Well, you got hills there, mountains.
You said that we can only go at 21. We can go at any number we can. Come on.
Oh, no, I'm saying the next lower designation,
Right.
if we were going to drop it from 30, would be 21 units to the acre would be the next category below 30.
And the next category below that would be?
15.
Yeah.
I'd hate to,
I'm just looking at the nature of the city, and I think we're going to put a lot of density along Santa Fe, and I'd rather see it there because it's adjacent to the railroad track and closer to the freeway than in an area that is typically seen as a residential
To give the
component to
council
our
an
town.
to give the council an understanding of what that density is, 15 units to the acre is essentially what the Monarch project is developed
Yeah.
at down on Thibodeau Road. Two-story,
So you're
walk-up
saying 21?
type,
15
multi-unit
would be like
buildings.
Monarch.
Yeah.
You know, the Monarch project we have,
But you're saying what?
15.
he's going to 15.
21 would be okay.
If I could just ask a question. There had to be something that went into making the recommendation for the proposal, I mean, the proposed level of 30. Was that as a result of input from community groups, from advisory committees, from planning? I mean, you didn't just pick that number out of the air.
Oh, no,
You had to be
we-
looking at future growth and what this city's going to look like 20 years, 30 years from now.
The staff recommendation is based on the fact that we didn't feel like 40 was appropriate.
Right.
But the 21 is a density that you can accommodate in many other areas of the city based on the current zoning. So it provides a little more density than what you can get in most of the other multifamily zones. But it doesn't get to the extent of density that you would see down in the core or near the major transportation corridors. It's sort of a middle ground. Provides more opportunities for the property owners to develop their land because there are a lot of small lots in that area, but doesn't get to the extent of height and density that you would see next to the Sprinter station. That's where the staff recommendation essentially was developed. And there was some input from some community members on that number.
Can I approach this from a different direction? If I think of Santa Fe and what we want to do with that in our redevelopment area, we want to bring that down to 2 lanes and make it much more walkable. I don't see that same opportunity on Civic Center Drive. On Civic Center Drive, if you do the setbacks and increase the density, you're really not going to have that walkability that you have someplace else. I don't see a lot of commercial property going into that area. I just don't envision that, not like you would see down in the downtown area.
I think you're right about that.
It won't be dense like the downtown area, but then you have some businesses there already. You have like the attorney's office, and there's a building not too far from here.
The
There's
whole
a
thought is to
2-story.
replace that. We would replace that with the 2 stories.
Yeah, 2 or 3 stories, right? You could,
3 stories is what's proposed. Currently, it's allowed 2 stories, 35 feet is the height limit in that area, and that whole corridor is currently zoned commercial.
It appears that we're trying to put together a plan that it's a long-term plan for how we want to address the appearance of our city. And to me, the beauty of Vista is in its topography, and so if we go against that, I think that's what you'll do. If you go 3 stories, if you go higher density, you'll go against that, the beauty that we have in some of our areas of our city. And I think even though Civic Center Drive has been altered over the years, I just don't think there's the same opportunity on that boulevard that we'd have as we dress out Santa Fe.
You've kind of evoked my thinking in this, and I tend to agree by virtue of the fact that traffic and getting in and out of parking or wherever, it's bad enough as it is, and to put more dense population in there would just add to the, you've got some blind, you're going up hills and down hills in that here on Civic Center Drive, and getting in and out of driveways and so forth. I think that might just make that more difficult. What do you think about that aspect of it?
From a staff perspective, I think the 21 units to the acre is still a great opportunity for the property owners out there to develop their land. 2 stories, I think, is still reasonable considering the adjacent residential use. So I don't have any objection from the staff perspective of reducing that building height and density along that corridor.
I'm going to go one more time with the 15, simply because if you think about traffic flow within the city, if we slow down traffic on Santa Fe, the natural flow is going to be through Civic Center Drive onto Vista Way and out through the city. So that's going to increase the traffic on that particular boulevard, and there you'd want to decrease the number of cuts and the number of people pulling into that street.
Mayor Pro Tem Aguilera.
Okay, I guess I'll put my 2 cents in. Well, first of all, I think the market can better dictate what would be acceptable there myself. Second of all, I think that road is, its proximity to the freeway lends to that zoning, because, the last thing we want, we want to get it more dense, closer to the freeways, to our main highways. Obviously, it would be ideal if there was a transit center there, but it's not. But it still has easy access to the freeway, and I would rather see more cars accessing the freeway in a short distance than in the outer parts of our city. And I think the whole general plan is trying to shuttle the more dense housing towards the freeway, towards the transit center, towards a Sprinter. And I think we should just let the market decide. I'm fine with the 30 units myself. 21, I definitely don't think 15 would be. I don't think anybody's going to develop it for 15 units. And I think we need to think about if we want that developed. It's not getting developed right now, is it?
No.
No.
And it is commercial property, right?
Yes.
And I think a step up to 15 is just not going to allow for development. 21's barely going to make it so that it's profitable for a developer to come in and do it. I think 30's better. Let the market decide if 21 or 30 is going to be the number.
I kind of agree with that. I kind of think the market will decide actually what it is, not to limit them.
In saying that, are you saying that we should just go ahead and leave the cap higher, and then the market may come in lower instead of us putting the kind of a limit on what kind of density we want along that corridor?
Yeah,
It still is the center of our city, so we're looking over a long-term plan. So I'm thinking it's in the center of our city, and it has freeway access, very close to the freeway. So I would think that we could. I think that when someone comes in with a plan, you can make it work. Whatever the plan is, we'll leave it to the Planning Commission, and they can.
If you don't mind, I foresee that Lincoln Middle School, or whatever they call it now, is going to be purchased and utilized as a beautiful downtown area. And so I would think that we would want to have the most attractive units in that area. And if you're saying that 15 is Monarch as our example, I see nothing wrong with Monarch, and I think I'd be pleased to see that type of product in that area. Anything more than that, I think, would ruin traffic flow. And I've lived in the city long enough to know that Vista Way and now the Civic Center Drive are the major thoroughfares for people going into the county. And if we congest that area, we're creating a lot of problems for ourselves in the future.
Yeah, John?
Can I address that? I think Monarch was used as a density example, not necessarily as the design or look. I think we have a great planning commission. It's going to require Monarch level, whether it's 15, 21, or 40 units. I think I know when I was on the planning commission, that's kind of the way we were going, is we wanted higher end design. And I know as a council that I think everybody is on board with a better looking design, and Monarch is probably one of our best looking properties in the city, and that's something we should aspire to on all properties.
Yeah, as I see this, I would go along with what you've recommended. That's not necessarily going to be how it ends up.
Correct.
But it does give some flexibility for a developer to, and I've seen great looking upscale 3-story dwelling areas. So I'm not concerned about that. And we need to be and at some point a developer is going to have to get approval, and so whoever's sitting in these seats at that time will be the ones to say yay or nay on that. So I'll go along with the hard work you've put in, John.
Councilor Lopez, I know you're trying to jump in there. I see you want to say something.
Thank you. I agree with you, Steve, that the corridor, the Santa Fe corridor, will be one of the highest areas in Vista, and that's why we planned it that way. Escondido Civic Center will be a highly traveled street. Will be difficult to get into. It's difficult now. The way the hills are, the way it's designed, the hills are right now, it's pretty hard to build a lot of units on there. Like Mr. Aguilera says, I think the housing will dictate, building will dictate. 30 to 21 would be okay with me, whatever you guys decide.
Okay.
Plus, I think when they combine the different, I think we're thinking it's individual lots. It's going to be, an acre is several lots, so it's a bigger area.
It's bigger.
So, when you think about that. So I guess we're okay then, except for you.
We're okay with 21? Is that what I hear?
No, I don't think that's what you're hearing. Nice try.
I tried, Steve.
Nice try. So I guess we're okay. So now do you need a motion or no? So we have consensus? Everybody shake their head yes?
Yes.
Okay, we have consensus.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, John. Mr. Conley. Okay, so where are we? That was a long discussion. We are now at oral communications. Any member of the public can address the governing bodies for 3 minutes. And the little timer is right there on the thing. And you have, when it turns yellow, I think you have 30 seconds left. And then when it turns red, you should conclude. So I have 1, 2, 3 speakers. So no, I have 4 speakers here. So let's see. We'll start with, I guess, I'll start with you, JC, because you're going to be quick, I think.
I got it a little.
Oh, wait, the league lady should be first? I don't know. Because he was. Okay, never mind. You sit down, JC. I have.
Oh.
I'm just teasing you. Yeah, sit down. The league lady's going to go first. Barbara, is it Lorenzen? League of. Sorry, I shuffled them. I was trying to take the quick ones. I was thinking this will be really quick. So.
I like the league lady. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Barbara Lorenzen, and I'm representing the League of Women Voters, North County, San Diego. And I'm here to present our sustainability report that Vista participated in. There were 7 cities that participated in this survey. And I particularly want to thank John Conley and his staff, because I understand that they were extremely cooperative and just really, really helpful in working with them. This survey included the cities of Oceanside, Carlsbad, Del Mar, Encinitas, and Solana Beach. We will be doing another survey in 2012, and also we're adding San Marcos and Escondido because our league has expanded. We really appreciate the time required and the results that we got from it. I don't know if you've seen the report yet. I gave it to Marcy earlier, and she's going to distribute it to you. But I think you'll enjoy looking at how we compare with other cities. And I think it's a good advertisement for our city, too. And we really believe that the citizens of Vista, expect us to do this and their local government to follow a sustainable path. And if anyone would like to see this, it's also on our website, which is on the front of the report. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I understand you're going to be our new representative. Is that true? You're going to be our new representative? Yes, okay. Well, thank you. Oh, we're not. Now we all know. No. Okay, thank you. Our next speaker will be, I got them in order here, Chuck Rabel. They got me back on track.
Well, I'm glad, number one, that we all agree that Escondido Avenue, Civic Center Drive is the main gateway into Vista. However, you get off the freeway, you're still looking at Palms or Us, and it's a fire waiting to happen. And if you're going to make you can only have one opportunity to make a good first impression, and that is a gateway. If I can, remind you of three things. Thursday, the 10th, is the Marine Corps birthday. If you would, if you know a Marine, either hug them or thank them for their service. The 11th, of course, is Veterans Day. Lots of activity going on in North County. Check your paper or talk to a vet. And finally and lastly, the annual ISA Family Foundation is having their annual pancake breakfast and toy drive. It's on Saturday the 19th from 8 to 11 at the South Mission Club on Camp Pendleton. You need to either bring a new toy or make a tax deductible donation. The toys should, one per guest, for ages 3 through 13. I'm sure I'll see some of you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rabel.
I have a question or a statement. Is I know that we don't respond to oral communications on answers, but I would like if Mr. Conley, could you come address the issue about the palms?
Sure. We looked at the palm issue. That property is owned by a private property owner, and so the city cannot compel a private property owner to trim the trees unless there's a fire hazard. So I'm sure we'll have the fire department look at it further to see if there's a fire hazard. We can approach the private property owner based on that, but it is not city property, so we can't go and trim the trees unless the property owner gives us permission to do so, and we generally don't do that on private property unless there's a health and safety issue.
Thank you, Mr. Conley.
And I believe the fire department has reviewed that and had the discussion. And Chief Hahn?
I'm Battalion Chief Hahn. I'm also the fire marshal. And we did look at the palm tree issue on that property. And the fire code is fairly specific, in property rights versus, fire hazards. We are able to compel property owners if it is a fire hazard, and they define that as if those trees were within 100 feet of structures. So we went out and measured that, and unfortunately they're not. or I guess for that property owner, fortunately, they are not. So just like we can't, go out in the open spaces and have property owners remove flammable vegetation just that's out there, we can't require that property owner. We have contacted him. We have been able to make him abate weeds on that property, and we've asked him, and we asked him again if he would trim up those trees, and he has told us that he will not.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. So, what are you going to do, Mr. Rabel? Oh, he's going to have an answer. Okay.
I obviously can't do anything myself, but a suggestion. Check with the business license people and see if the guy's got a license.
What?
At least we get his sign down, okay?
Okay. Okay, so our next speaker is Philip, is it Pizzuto?
Probably grandfathered in somehow.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Philip Pizzuto. I live at 1677 Mission Meadows Drive in Oceanside. Tonight I'm addressing you as president of the Vista Band Boosters nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting the Vista High School Regimental Band and Pageantry Corps. This is just a follow-up to the invitation we sent you to attend the Vista Invitational Field Tournament taking place this Saturday, November 12th. If you've never been to a band tournament, this event showcases high school bands from throughout Southern California performing their field shows and competition. We're proud to reach a milestone this year as we celebrate the 30th anniversary of VIFT. 33 bands are scheduled to perform this day-long event. We anticipate more than 6,000 people will visit the Duquesne Stadium at Vista High School as competitors and spectators. VIFT has a reputation to bring a premier tournament in Southern California, and we're preparing to put on a show that will make the community proud. Under the direction of band director Ralph Ewell, and the Vista Regimental Band and Pageantry has a long and storied reputation of excellence in the state, receiving numerous awards in various tournaments. Many of the students that comprise this organization are honor students and are routinely among the school's valedictorians. This program focuses on excellence and is creating the future leaders of our community. We hope as many of you as possible can attend VIFT as our guests and assist us in presenting the awards at the end of the evening. Members of the Vista Unified School District, the Oceanside City Council, and State Assemblywoman Diane Harkey will also be in attendance. We also invite the community to join us for a day of outstanding music and pageantry. For more information, you can go to our website, www.vistaband.org, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have them. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
No, I look forward to being there.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing you.
Yeah. Thank you. Our last speaker will be J.C. Wynn. Sorry.
There we go. It's all right. I like being the last one because in that way I can make everybody smile. First of all, I'd like to say I'll try to get a hold of that palm guy and use a little sugar and see if I can't get a fly. How's that? Hello, Mayor and City Council. I made a little prepared thing this time. As all of you know, I'm J.C. Wynn, a.k.a. Santa Claus. It's been brought to my attention that once again, people in charge of making decisions pertaining to Santa Claus riding the shiny new fire truck in the holiday parade this year feels it's still too much of a liability to the city and are voting against the annual tradition passed down from generation to generation for Santa Claus to end the parade on the back of the shiny red fire truck, waving to all the boys and girls on both sides of the road and wishing everybody Merry Christmas, as I've done in the past. It's a feeling that you really have to experience to know, okay? It's one of the great things. I've sat in these very chambers many occasions and heard more than one of you on the council speak about being a can-do council, and sometimes you just got to do it, okay? My personal opinion set aside, I think this is one of the occasions where the can-do spirit should get it done. The kids of our community are really counting on some kind of executive order in their favor for a change, because it seems like it's always going against them lately. One of our prestigious local attorneys and former councilman who wishes to remain anonymous composed one of these waivers of liability forms and suggests that it might help ease the mind of the powers to be, which I'll sign right now in front of everybody. Oops. And I won't sign Santa Claus.
Who are the powers to be?
Well, I don't know. That's for you guys to decide.
Not our
11,
parade. It's a
8,
chamber parade.
11. Yeah, but
Here comes the
chamber
fire
don't
chief.
own the
Here
fire
comes the
truck.
fire chief to talk to you.
Okay. 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 The proceed, here's the waiver of liability form, powers to be. He too, along with the hopes of many others, hopes Santa Claus can return to the top of his shiny red fire truck in this year's holiday parade on December the 3rd.
We're happy to share our fire truck with you.
Thank you for your time and consideration in this matter. And P.S. I have a little P.S. I scoured the internet from Google to Bing to the NewYorkTimes.com and the LA.com. Tried to find one occasion where in the past at any time Santa riding the back of a fire truck in a parade was a liability to any city and could find none in the history of Santa riding a fire truck. So, you know, it's not that I don't want to ride the fire truck with the mayor or, you know, the council people or I've ridden the fire truck a couple. They were inside, I was on top, but it's just, you know, Santa's not one of those, he's one of the presidential type guy, you know, like, he's got to be, he can't sit in the front seat and wave to the kids on the right side, and then all the kids on the left side are saying, where's Santa? You know, can't see him. He's got to be up there and in the middle and on top. And, you know, if it's just a little liability thing or if it's just a matter of paying for the diesel, you know, I'll spring, you know, or paying for the guy that drives the truck, I'll pay for that too, you know what I mean? But if it's a matter of cost, if it's a matter of liability, if it's a matter of insurance, no matter what the matter is, let me know what the matter is and we'll take care of it.
I think our city attorney might like to address that.
There you go. If you can read this.
And or our fire chief might want to address it also. We have a couple of people, so sit down.
I'm very confident that a prestigious attorney did that and did a good job with it. Unfortunately, federal and state regulations don't even allow firemen to ride on the top of the truck. They have to be inside, they have to be safety belted. Safety belted even in a fire truck, and those are the requirements that we live with in this new century. And no one gets to ride on top of a fire truck or any other apparatus or in the cherry picker on the back of a service truck of any kind. It's where OSHA and all of those regulations have taken us. And while we've probably lost something in the process, that's really where we are. And if you want an example of what it really means, I would invite you to take a close look at a tape of the Rose Parade. And in the Rose Parade, you'll see some people standing. And when they're standing, there's a large 3-inch steel pipe welded up behind them on the frame of the truck, and they're safety belted in around that. And obviously, with all due respect, we're not going to weld a 3-inch pipe on the back of our fire truck so that we can accommodate a safety position there. So
I could do it.
That's why we rented a private fire truck that's specifically configured for seating for the council, and have invited you to be on it. But if that doesn't work, it won't. You're not going to be able to use the fire truck. Days have
I'll have
gone.
to rent my own fire truck.
Have your own fire truck? That's a different story.
I have a suggestion or a question. What if council was to ride in a regular fire truck and have Santa go in the rented truck?
We pay for it?
Well, the council certainly could ride in one of our fire trucks, but you'd have to be riding inside in the compartments, and I think the visibility there is considerably more constrained than in the truck that's being rented.
Additionally, one of the decision made is we have to pay overtime. We have to pay time and a half overtime for the crew for hours and hours, and that's a full crew. So if you wanted to do that, I mean, this is why this was the most inexpensive option, was to rent at the track, which was significantly cheaper than paying overtime, time and a half for the crew to be out there all day.
So there won't be any fire trucks out there at all?
There'll be the fire truck that we rented.
Just that one?
Oh, none of your trucks are out there this year?
No.
Oh.
I'm going to jump into this one a little bit too, because I believe Santa needs to be on a fire truck. Would the fire truck that we're renting suffice to be the fire truck that you would need to be on?
It is an antique one, and we have ordered side plates, side insignia for because the fire truck comes with nothing on it. It's just a plain fire truck, and we've ordered signs for each side that say Vista to give it some sense of the city.
Since it's an older fire truck, can it be adapted for him to sit up on top? I mean, it's a rental. It's not.
Well, there is a place for him to sit up on top.
Okay.
There's like 15 seating positions on top of this fire truck that we're running.
So, Mr. Wynn, would that suffice for you?
I'm probably going to get my own truck.
So you have another alternative.
He can sit outside on the truck, on the fire truck. He just doesn't want to be. He wants to be by himself. He doesn't want to be with the council.
Understand. Well, I don't want to upstage Santa Claus. So I mean, I would definitely sacrifice it, go on some convertible or something like that, or whatever, in lieu of Santa being on the fire truck.
So you're having the city rent for the Chamber Parade. I mean, we're renting it for the council. I mean, what's our nexus? I mean, what do we?
I think Santa is pretty important to the kids that are going in the parade.
Councilmember Coles. And then Councilmember Lopez. Everybody's going to join in here.
We've all gotten emails about this issue, and we've responded back to the city so they could have direction of what to do, and we've kind of given them direction as far as I know of our feelings, and it's a little bit like the times they are changing, and we don't have excessive money. We're nickel and diming everything that we can. And the trade-off was either ride inside the trucks like we did last year, which is less visible, which was all right with me, but or rent the truck. So we can't rent the truck and have overtime too. That's just a double expense that we hadn't anticipated. So
I'm not suggesting that we do both.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what you're suggesting, getting your own convertible. And I don't have a convertible, and I don't know if you've got enough room in your convertible for five of us.
In years past, there have been car dealerships that provided them, and so
well,
I mean, there's the investigation. I don't know how much time we have.
But I do think it's still a good point that our city manager is making. This was the antique truck was expressly commissioned for council. So if council's not going to ride on it, then I don't think we should spend the money, because really our Santa is a chamber, he's really representing the Chamber of Commerce. It's a chamber parade. It's not a City of Vista parade. We're just participating in it. So what we would need to do is agree that we want to subsidize the chamber parade to the amount of, to rent that truck. And I'm not sure that we might all agree with doing that. I don't know.
Councilmember Lopez.
Thank you. Well, I don't want to disappoint Santa Claus because I have 3 grandkids, and if I disappoint him, maybe they won't see my grandkids. So, the city's renting a fire truck for the council, correct? They are paying X amount of dollars, correct? Well, I'm one of the council who is getting his own car. I'm not going with because of last year's problems that you had, that you have to be inside, and so I am going in a car this year so that, everybody can see that ugly face of mine, So I think that if it's a chamber event, and I think that since the city is renting one, why don't we go split the costs with the chamber and let Santa ride on that fire truck like he wants, and we'll just have to find our own cars or something, because I think it's important that Santa is up there. I seen what happened last year when I rode in the fire truck, that the people on this side you're waving to, and everybody said, "Where were you?" Well, I was on the other side, you know. So I understand what he's saying about that, and I think that it'd be a good idea that if the city would work together with the chamber and give up the fire truck for Santa Claus.
No, I don't agree.
Can we hear from Mr. Fisher? He's been standing up there very politely the whole time.
That's true. Chief Fisher, hello.
Well, you could just call me Scrooge. I'm really sorry about this. I really feel bad about this. Yeah, the issue is, you know, the reason we have the rules that nobody rides on the outside is because somebody's fallen off of the fire truck and hurt themselves. And we're talking about professional folks who have fallen off the trucks and hurt themselves. The thing that I worry about most is having Santa up on the fire truck and somebody have, you know, a little kid run out, somebody have to hit the brake real quick, and Santa was to go tumbling off that fire truck in front of, 300 or 400 kids. I mean, I think that would be more traumatic than, him not being there at all. So I'm really concerned about that. We can, we're willing to work with whatever will accommodate the council and whatever the budget will support in terms of having folks there. We can get a unit there that's on duty, but typically we will have 3 or 4 units in there, which means we have 2 or 3 that are off duty that we're paying overtime. And that's what we're trying to save. And so, we'll do whatever the council thinks is most appropriate.
Let me, I'd like to interject here. The city provides $8,500 to the chamber for the holiday parade already, for the Christmas parade. $8,500. And so our contribution is already significant. In addition to that, we pay for on overtime all the traffic. That's public works crews putting out barriers and cones, and the sheriff's department is overtime, time and a half. So our contribution to the Christmas parade is significant. Anything else beyond that is to be the chamber's responsibility. But I have a suggestion, is that I see the division, and this is an issue that we can't take action on. The council cannot take action on an item that's not on the agenda. And so I suggest that you submit this back to us and have staff come to a conclusion on this issue. And if you have any other comments.
Well, I think it sounds like Santa's going to have his elves build one.
So
I think it's going to get taken care of.
And see what we can do. So, I mean, because we already have a $15,000 approximately contribution to the parade, and we tried to cap that because for good reason. Let's.
We can just walk.
Let's staff put together.
It sounds like it's going to get taken care of. So
something reasonable, okay. And we will get back. We will let you know what we've resolved.
Yeah, I don't want to bring this back up as an agenda
It
item.
won't be, because the Christmas parade will be
After,
held before your next council meeting.
Okay. We can vote retroactively to
So we will work something out.
But I think the solution that you've suggested for us at the current point works pretty well, and I think JC's resolved in his mind how he's going to handle this, so I think we're going to be okay.
I'd just like to point out one more thing. Of all these numbers, I hear numbers, but since I've been Santa for the City of Vista, it's cost them zero money for Santa. And not only that, Santa has sat at the Kokorian every day after the parade all day long until the line of kids getting free pictures with Santa got all their free pictures for free. So
Good for you.
Saved somebody something.
Thank you, JC, for doing that.
Let's charge $1 and you'll have enough for a fire truck.
Okay. Are we done with, are we ready to move on?
I'm ready.
Okay, remarks. Any reports, or I'll start with Councilmember Coles.
I've made all my remarks during the course
Councilmember
of the
Lopez
meeting.
went already, it looks like. Mayor Pro Tem Aguilera.
Yeah, just a couple of things. I attended the Vista High School and RBV game. Thank you to Mr. Wynn. And Vista High was the victor. And yeah, it was a good game. You know, I mean, I think for the evening, the best team won. So,
Hey.
yeah,
You're supposed to represent the whole city.
the best team won for that evening.
Okay.
So, I think
Got Rancho
Operation
students
Hope-
out there, you know.
What's that?
There's Rancho students out here, you know. Thank you. Yeah.
Best team for the evening. So.
Be careful, you're elected official.
That's right. But just want to remind again about Operation Hope this Saturday. It is 4 to 6 o'clock. And I did attend a SANDAG meeting where they did talk about the mitigation in that as well. But one of the things that they did speak about was the integration of mixed use in the general plan there as well. So I think the City of Vista is doing the right thing in their general plan. And it's important to the growth of not only Vista, but San Diego County. And they have designated us as a town site, which is quite a few levels down from the metropolitan. So we're still going to maintain our, I mean, they designated us through our general plan. So our staff is the one that's actually submitted our plans. And so anyways, I think we're going down the right road, and I know our planning commission is doing the right thing in that area. So I was just pleased to see that as one of the items tonight. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Gronke.
Yes, Mr. Ribble's not here anymore, but I will be attending a Memorial Day event over in Oceanside. And unfortunately, Vista used to have one but at Walmart, but that has been discontinued, and I hope someday that will come back again.
Yeah, Friday is thank all of the service people that have served our country and that are serving it now and that have served in the past, and we need to thank them all. We owe them a lot, they and their families both. So, and also, I don't think we have any more meetings. I think should I wish them happy Thanksgiving? Do we have any more meetings this year? This is it, or not this year, but this month. Yeah, so happy Thanksgiving. Boy, it's coming, isn't it? Turkey, yum. Okay, City Manager.
On Thursday, the oral arguments begin on the redevelopment issue in the lawsuit with the state of California. So it'll be interesting. Their goal is certainly to have a decision by January. We'll know what the outcome is for Vista and all other redevelopment agencies in the state. That's pretty much it for the now.
City Attorney, Darrell Piper.
I have nothing to add. It's all been said. Happy Thanksgiving.
City Clerk, do you have anything to add today? Marcy?
Thank all the students for staying so long. Happy Thanksgiving.
How about Kathy down there? Do you have anything you want to add? No? Okay. Oh, Councilmember Lopez.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank Patrick Johnson for immediately working on the Haynes Drive there downtown with Public Works, that they patched it up. Well, I haven't seen it, but I heard they worked on it here in the last day or so, or yesterday. I don't know when they worked on it. But thank you for your speedy work on that and paying attention to, you know, when folks in our town need something done, that we get to it as soon as we can. And thank you very much. I received quite a few emails that the city was that they did it and they were pleased with it. So thank you very much.
Okay, with that, if nobody else, anything else for the order, we are adjourned. Thanks for sticking it out to all the Rancho kids back there. You have to write good reports.